In 1934, Chrysler put one of the most advanced cars in America into showrooms, and buyers treated it like a mistake. The Airflow was shaped in wind tunnels, built around a stronger body, and arranged so passengers sat lower and farther forward, instead of riding behind a long hood like everyone expected. It promised better balance, better safety, and a glimpse of where cars were headed. So why did a car that predicted the future nearly poison Chrysler's reputation? Was it flawed, badly sold, or simply too new for the country buying it? Before the Airflow arrived, most American cars still looked as if they had been assembled from separate pieces. The grille stood upright like a radiator on the front of a building. The headlights sat outside the body. The fenders were distinct shapes bolted over the wheels. A long hood stretched forward, and behind it sat a boxy passenger compartment with passengers riding high and far back. Those proportions were not accidental. They told buyers exactly what they were getting. A long hood suggested power and status. A tall grille gave the car a formal face. Separate fenders, running boards, and a familiar roofline made even a new model feel understandable at a glance. That mattered even more during the Great Depression. A car was one of the largest purchases an American family could make, and buyers were not eager to gamble on something strange. They wanted durability, resale value, and a brand that looked respectable in front of the house. In a market shaped by fear and tight money, trust often mattered more than novelty. Chrysler, though, had built its identity around engineering. Carl Breer, Fred Zeter, and Owen Skelton were not just styling men chasing a new silhouette. They were problem solvers, interested in weight distribution, body strength, suspension behavior, and the way air moved around a car at speed. So when Chrysler began developing the Airflow, it was not simply asking how to make next year's car look fresher. It was asking whether the accepted shape of the American automobile was wrong. Chrysler took that question into the wind. At Highland Park, the company built one of the industry's most serious aerodynamic testing programs. Engineers used scale models, controlled airflow, and guidance connected to Orville Wright, one of the men who had helped prove that air itself could be engineered around. This was not a styling room guessing at a modern shape. It was a laboratory trying to measure what the car was doing wrong. The results were embarrassing for the ordinary automobile. Many conventional cars pushed through the air with a blunt front, exposed lamps, open fenders, upright glass, and hard edges that created drag and turbulence. In some tests, familiar car shapes moved through the airflow more cleanly backward than forward. The accepted front end of an American car was often its worst aerodynamic feature. That discovery helped explain the Airflow's strange face. Its nose was rounded instead of upright. The grille leaned back and blended into the front. The headlamps were pulled into the body instead of standing apart. The windshield sloped, the roofline flowed into the rear, and the body sides looked less like separate panels attached to a frame. The goal was to make air stay attached longer, break away more smoothly, and waste less energy in turbulence. Chrysler also paired that shape with a more integrated body structure and a cabin placed farther forward, so the car was not just streamlined on the outside. Its engineering and proportions were being reconsidered together. Seen from inside Chrysler, the Airflow was not a stunt. It was the logical answer to data gathered in a wind tunnel. The science made sense, but the showroom would soon prove that science alone could not sell a car. Under the Airflow's rounded body was a packaging idea that was just as radical as its shape. Chrysler moved the engine forward, placing it over the front axle instead of keeping it farther back behind the wheels. That single change helped shift weight toward the front, where it could be better supported, and it freed up space in the middle of the car. The passengers were moved between the axles, not perched over the rear wheels as they often were in conventional designs. The rear seat was pushed forward significantly, away from the harshest vertical motion at the back of the frame. For passengers, that meant a smoother ride, because they were sitting in the most stable part of the car instead of bouncing near the tail. This changed the Airflow's proportions from the inside out. The cabin grew larger, the seating position became more natural, and the car no longer needed the same long hood and cramped rear compartment that buyers were used to seeing. It was not simply a streamlined body placed over ordinary bones. The layout itself had been rearranged around comfort, balance, and usable space. Chrysler also changed how the body was built. The Airflow did not rely on a purely separate body dropped onto a ladder frame in the traditional way. Instead, many of its body panels were welded into a stronger, more integrated structure, often described as semi-unitized construction. The frame and body worked together more closely, making the car more rigid while reducing unnecessary weight. That rigidity mattered. A stiffer structure helped the suspension do its job, reduced body flex, and gave the car better crash strength than many competitors of its time. Chrysler demonstrated this with dramatic safety tests, including sending an Airflow off a cliff and then driving it away afterward. Many of these ideas would become normal later: better weight distribution, passengers placed within the wheelbase, stronger integrated bodies, and design shaped by engineering instead of ornament. In the Airflow, they arrived early, all at once. But that was also the problem. The same construction methods and packaging choices that made the car advanced were about to make it difficult, expensive, and frustrating to build. The Airflow reached the market before Chrysler had fully mastered how to build it. Its engineering demanded new habits on the factory floor. The welded structure, the complex body panels, and the tight relationship between the frame and body left less room for the old approach of fitting parts together by feel. Panels had to line up more precisely. Assembly steps had to be coordinated more carefully. A design that looked smooth from the outside created a harder job inside the plant. That difficulty showed up at the worst possible moment. Dealers were expecting a breakthrough car they could put in front of curious buyers, but deliveries were delayed. Some orders could not be filled on time. Showrooms that were supposed to be proving Chrysler's confidence were left waiting, explaining, and in some cases apologizing. Early cars also carried reports of mechanical troubles and uneven fit and finish. These problems were not necessarily unusual for an ambitious new model in the 1930s, but the Airflow did not have the luxury of being treated like an ordinary car. Buyers were already suspicious of its shape. Competitors were already happy to call it strange. Every rattle, leak, adjustment issue, or delivery delay became evidence for people who wanted to believe the car was a mistake. That is the cruel rule for a radical product. It has to feel more finished than everything around it. If a familiar car has a flaw, buyers may forgive it. If an unfamiliar car has the same flaw, they see the flaw as proof that the whole idea is wrong. Chrysler had built a car meant to project scientific confidence, but the launch made it look uncertain. The company needed the first owners, dealers, and reporters to become advocates. Instead, too many early encounters gave the Airflow a reputation it could not afford. And once the cars finally reached the showroom floor, Chrysler faced an even harder problem: convincing Americans to want a future that did not look like the past. To many Americans, the Airflow did not look advanced. It looked wrong. A prestige car in the early 1930s was supposed to have a long hood, a proud upright grille, separate fenders, and a cabin set back behind the engine. That shape told buyers what they were paying for. It suggested power, status, and tradition. The Airflow rearranged those signals. Its hood was shorter, its nose was rounded, its fenders flowed into the body. The passenger compartment sat farther forward, giving the car a profile that seemed unfamiliar even before anyone heard about wind tunnels or weight distribution. Some observers understood the point. They saw a cleaner, more modern machine, designed around airflow instead of decoration. But many showroom visitors saw something heavy, bulbous, and awkward. The same features engineers considered logical made the car harder to read as expensive. It did not deliver the visual reassurance people expected from a large Chrysler or DeSoto. That mattered because the Airflow arrived during the Great Depression, when a new car was not just a purchase, it was a risk. Families and business owners spending scarce money wanted confidence that the car would hold value, look respectable, and not mark them as foolish. Experimentation may have sounded impressive in an advertisement, but on the showroom floor, familiarity felt safer. Chrysler learned that lesson inside its own dealerships. More conventional Chrysler models still offered solid engineering, but they wore bodies that buyers understood. They looked like cars a successful person was supposed to own. When customers compared them with the Airflow, the familiar models often won, not because they were more forward-thinking, but because they asked for less trust. The Airflow was losing the argument before the test drive. Its engineering solved real problems, and many of its ideas would shape the future of the automobile. But Chrysler had bundled those ideas into a form that challenged too many habits at once. The public did see the future. In 1934, A large part of it stepped back. Chrysler did not abandon the Airflow immediately. Instead, it tried to make the car easier for buyers to accept. The most visible changes came at the front. Later Airflows received more conventional grille treatments, with stronger vertical elements and a face that looked less like a single rounded surface. Chrysler also adjusted trim and details to give the car a more familiar presence in the showroom. But those revisions created a problem of their own. The Airflow was still too unusual for conservative buyers who wanted a traditional luxury shape. At the same time, every added conventional cue weakened the purity of the original idea. The car was no longer the bold, seamless vision Chrysler had first promoted, but it was not normal enough to blend in with everything else. Sales never recovered. The Airflow remained in production from 1934 through 1937, but total output stayed below 29,600 units. For a company that had invested heavily in engineering, tooling, and publicity, that was a painful result. The car had been designed to prove Chrysler's technical leadership, but in the market, it became evidence of how dangerous advanced design could be when customers were not ready for it. The business lesson was clear inside the industry. Safer styling regained priority. Automakers could experiment under the skin, but the body had to reassure buyers first. The Airflow's commercial failure seemed final, yet the ideas it carried were not finished. Sales had rejected the car, but the future had not. The Airflow did not disappear as much as it dissolved into the rest of the industry. Its most radical ideas became normal only after they were separated from the shape that had scared buyers away. Aerodynamics returned gradually. By the late 1930s and 1940s, more cars adopted sloped windshields, smoother fenders, lower rooflines, and bodies that treated air resistance as a real engineering problem. Later, wind tunnels became routine tools instead of publicity novelties. Its structure also pointed forward. The Airflow's body was not just a decorative shell sitting high over a frame. Chrysler had pushed toward a stronger, more integrated design, with passengers placed inside the wheelbase rather than perched over the rear axle. That helped improve ride quality, interior space, and weight distribution, goals that became central to modern car packaging. That is why the Airflow is not a simple story of genius ignored. The car had real launch problems, early quality concerns, and styling that landed too abruptly for the market. Buyers were not foolish for hesitating. Chrysler had asked them to accept too much change at once. The irony is that the rejected future arrived anyway. Automakers learned to hide new engineering inside shapes customers already trusted, then let the shapes evolve step by step. The Airflow lost as a product, but as a preview, it was far closer to the future than its sales figures suggested. The Chrysler Airflow proves that the future does not win by being correct alone. It needs timing, trust, and execution strong enough to carry buyers across the gap. That is why its failure still matters. Detroit did not bury the Airflow's ideas. It studied them, softened them, and sold them later. Thanks for watching. Tell us in the comments whether you think Chrysler was too early or simply too bold. And subscribe to Forgotten Detroit for more stories of bold successes and important failures.